Hey everyone, happy Friday and thanks for joining Automation Hour. My name is Rakesh Gupta and I'm your co-host. Here are the logistics. If you're joining first time, online will be muted. Please post your question to Salesforce Trailblazer Community Automation Hour group, or you can also post on the GoToWebinar chat. You can follow our Twitter handle, which is twitter.com/automation hour. You can visit our website for future webinars, and you can also visit our YouTube channel where you can watch all the previous recording. Here are the lineups for the rest of the year. Next time we have MVP Monica, and then we have a couple of MVP lineup and other people. So if you have any use case related to Salesforce Flow Automation you want to share with the community, feel free to reach out to me, Michelle, and we will happy to have you. Thanks to our sponsor, newest sponsor, Active Campaign, and our existing sponsor, Concrete.io. Without their help, it was not possible to bring this event free of cost to the community. And here is your co-host, David, Michelle, and myself. Michelle is the new addition of our team as Jen accepted and joined Salesforce. Without further ado, I am very happy to have Mary Tagler. She is Salesforce MVP, and she is going to talk about how you can connect Salesforce and Slack and post some formatted text. So Mary, to you.
Thanks, Rakesh. Can you switch presenter over to me?
You can go ahead. You can try now.
Yep. Okay, you should see my bio screen.
Yes, we can.
Happy Friday, everyone. I'm Mary Tagler. I'm a lead application administrator and Salesforce MVP. I'm based in Chicago, and I work for a company called Relativity. I'm part of our Salesforce team, which is approximately 6 dedicated individuals plus some additional personnel in our department. We work in the legal software space, so we specifically work in e-discovery. I'm also the co-founder of Chicago Salesforce Saturday. I've presented at Dreamforce, a few community events, and I'm excited to come back to Automation Hour. This is my second time presenting. Prior to becoming an Salesforce admin, I was also a certified financial planner, have a few Salesforce Agile related certificates as well. And I'm a board member of our women's resource group, RelWow at Relativity. I've added my Twitter handle if any of you want to connect after this presentation. So with that, I'm going to jump in and talk about our agenda. So the first thing we're going to talk about is the Appexchange app versus the unofficial Salesforce.com package. We're going to spend most of our time talking today about that unofficial package. We're going to talk about the business problem that led me to create this solution and what that solution looks like. Then we're going to step through the Slack and Salesforce configuration. We're going to get more into the weeds and break down how I built it. We'll talk a little bit about best practices, troubleshooting, and considerations. We're going to run through the solution one more time. It'll be a pre-recorded demo that I built, and then we'll leave some time for questions. So with that, I'm going to jump in. So our org is actually using both of these tools. We're using the Appexchange app and we're using the unofficial Salesforce package. We started out with the Appexchange app and we liked but didn't love it. I think there's still a lot of room to grow with the Appexchange app. I went ahead and highlighted some of the things that were big pluses or minuses for us when considering each option. So both options are free, which is huge for pretty much any organization. Being able to get something without having to pay extra usually makes your job a lot easier. Initially, we instituted this specifically for the purpose of sending records to Slack, and we can do without with both tools. We can integrate them both with Flow and Process Builder. Today, we're specifically going to talk about Flow. One of the downsides for us was anytime you need to incorporate the Appexchange app on a custom object, it requires a trigger and a class. This would be separate from the trigger you may already have on your object. It follows the predetermined naming conventions. And one of the things we noticed, I'll circle back to this, was the documentation really on that was a little thin. So that was one of our concerns that started to make us think about looking elsewhere. One of the other issues we had where we were integrating the Slack posts with our case object. And our users didn't love that the standard objects come basically pre-configured with sort of a top banner of fields that you get to see. It takes up a lot of space. Some of those fields they don't care about, and they really wanted to be able to fully personalize what we were pushing to Slack. We had some issues with permissioning. Some of those are unique to our company. For a user to push to Slack, they have to have the managed permission set. For us, we actually provision permission sets from Okta down to Salesforce. So if we were to assign a permission set at the Salesforce level, it would get overwritten periodically with our sync from Okta. That became especially challenging because we didn't have an easy way of assigning the permission set to well over 1,000 users. I didn't really want to invest the time doing it one by one. And then the other big problem we had was there was limited support and documentation. So there's not a lot of documentation yet, and I say yet because I know this Slack deal just closed, so I'm hoping to see that expounded on, and documentation related to the nitty-gritty of the app. So we did see a couple issues with unrelated actions our users were taking in our org, and then triggering some Slack errors, Slack code errors to be more specific. With the unofficial package, you know, a lot of the things that we needed, it already checked our boxes. So free and sending the records. What was really big was the complete post customization. So we could really completely tweak what we were posting, and we didn't need to create the trigger and class for the custom objects that the native app required. And if you don't have a dev resource, that can be huge. One of the things I will demo that was not on our list of nice to have or need to have, frankly, was threading posts. So we'll talk a little bit about how we can iterate on an initial post in Slack. Some of the other things we're not fully leveraging and I think do need to be a little more matured are managing Slack channels and members. So we looked at this. One of the issues I had was I wasn't able to pull back all of our channels. So we currently aren't using this today, but I can think of a lot of potential use cases for not necessarily managing a channel, but being able to identify from Salesforce who is generating the post and being able to really attribute it to that person or allow that person to follow. And then there's community-based support, as you see with a lot of the unofficial tools. So there's both the website, which has a place to post comments and questions. There's also a specific community group for unofficial Salesforce, as well as this community group, and a few other automation-related community groups. So there's a lot of places you can get support, a lot more than what we've found currently with the Appexchange app. So the problem. So we're going to use my fake company called Nacho World. Nacho World their product team wanted to post to Slack every time a product feedback record was created. They want to allow product owners to also post updates and view it as a single conversation instead of a bunch of disparate posts. They want to direct the post to the destination based on the product identified on the record. Some of these posts could potentially go to multiple destinations. Some of these posts will go to channels that are both either public or private. The team also wants to fully customize the layout of the post message and add custom formatting to make it more readable. From the flip side, the Nacho World Salesforce team doesn't want to create an additional trigger for an object and would like all triggers and classes to adhere to their naming conventions. Additionally, for the Salesforce team, since any employee could go in and initiate a product feedback record, the team's concerned about the Appexchange's app permission requirements and their ability to keep up with who has the assigned permission set. So let's look at the solution, and then we'll go in to start breaking it down. So from here, we're creating a record on our custom object. We are specifying our information within the record. We're setting our product, we're setting our contact, and we're going to go ahead and save it. Once we do that, we see that we've created the record. Pretty basic. We see that we have a bunch of stages in our product feedback lifecycle. We're going to come back to the field here called Slack thread and talk about that importance later. But we're going to continue on through this workflow. From here, we move to our Slack workspace. We see that we have lots of channels created, including a bunch of product-related channels. And we have a new message. When we click on it, we see that we have a new product feedback record for the packaging team. It's posted to product packaging. We see that it has this top line. This is actually a hyperlink, so if the user clicks on it, it will take them back into Salesforce. And here we've pushed down the status, the contact information, the account, and the feedback. We could actually create hyperlinks for the account and the contact if we so chose, so that the reader could also go back in and leverage those records. And this new tag we have up here is one of the reactions we have stored in our Slack org. So now we're returning back to our record. We're going to post an update because the product owner wants to add some notes. Here we're leveraging a screen flow, whereas in the first workflow we saw, we were using a record triggered flow. We've given users the option whether or not they want to post it to Slack. There may be minor updates, there may be spelling fixes. We didn't want to force an update every single time it was edited, but allow the users to choose. Sorry about that. Let me skip ahead. So I'm pausing for a second here. One of the things I want to point out is the Slack thread. We'll talk about this in more detail, but on our first post, we were able to get and store the Slack thread, which is the way, think of it like a record ID. So that will allow us to thread future posts back to that original main post that we put in our Slack channel. And we go into our Slack org and we see there is our update posted in line with the original post. So let's break it down. Some of the first things you need to do are one-time things. So you're going to need to create a Slack app or bot. This is really easy to do. It sounds more complicated than it is, and we'll step through some of those configurations in some of the next screens. You're going to need to define the scopes. I like to think of scopes, analogizing that to a Salesforce permission set. So we're basically defining what the bot can and can't do. We're going to need to identify our channels. We're going to want to know every place we want to be able to send posts and store that information. And then the last thing is we need to be mindful of markdown and reserved or escaped characters. So your Slack post will post as a JSON file. So you need to adhere to any characters that the JSON language has reserved. And then additionally, Slack reserves the left and right carets and the and signs. And we need to make sure that we've properly escaped or handled those as well. So when we build our bot, we go in and we create our bot. I provided the link on the previous slide. We choose from scratch. We name our bot. We give it a short description, and we can personalize it with both an avatar and a background color. We spend most of our time building out our bot in this side menu in the OAuth and permission section. And here's where we start to define our scopes. Again, those permission set type of permissions that tells us what the bot can do. And Slack provides you a nice little link within the description. So if you want to get a full list and really understand what you're assigning, you can do that. Here's an example of the scopes I've added to my bot. So it allows my bot to join public channels. If my bot wants to join a private channel, we have to go into that channel and invite them. You can do that either by app mentioning or adding them as an integration member. We want our chatbot to be able to write, and we want them to be able to write to public channels, even if they're not a member of that channel. We want, thinking ahead, we want them to be able to read users' email in a workspace. I envision that as potentially being able to see who's in a space and app mentioning them, or comparing who's there if we decided we wanted to manage our channels from Salesforce, and then read who is in a workspace. Once you do that, you need to install your app into the workspace. So this will actually create a line item in your app menu for your bot. You'll get this screen, and it will ask you to confirm that this is what you want to do. Now, if you work for a larger organization or an organization that already has some policies around Slack and Salesforce, one of the things you need to know is this could kick off an approval process. So internally at our company, when I created my bot and I clicked allow, the next thing that happened was it sent alert to our Slack administrative team, and our Slack administrative team had to approve it. So a good course of action is to reach out to your Slack team ahead of time, let them know you're creating this, and give them some context around what you're creating and why. Once you install your bot, you will get a bot user authorization token. We'll talk about this as we really step through the workflow, but this really authenticates, allows Salesforce and Slack to authenticate, and allows your posts to get posted into Slack. Anytime you change your bot's scopes, so if you add scopes or remove scopes, it will require you to reinstall into the workspace. What that does is it's really simply clicking this button, and that button will kick off an approval process again if you have one. It won't change the token. It won't change any of the other configuration that you've put in place. So it's a pretty simple process, but it could potentially be delayed if you have some approval hurdles in place. So the next thing we need to do is we need to start setting up our labels in Salesforce so we know where we're posting. The easiest way to do that is to go to the channel information in your Slack channel by right-clicking on it, choosing that option, and then at the very bottom, you'll see the channel ID, which I've blown up here, and there's a convenient little copy button. The other way to get to this is if you were to right-click and try and open your channel in a browser window, it will also show you the channel ID. And here's how I set up my labels. I'm actually going to show you two ways I set up labels. I set up the token in a label, and I highly recommend that you do that. If you use multiple use cases for a Slack post, it's good to have this label in there as opposed to hard coding. It allows you to reuse it within your automation. And then also, if for some reason you had a business case to set up two separate bots, it would allow you to differentiate which bot is handling which particular piece of automation. Here I've also created labels for all of my Slack channels that we're going to use in this example. One of the things I want to highlight is I like to follow naming conventions with my labels. I think it makes it easier for us as a team to find and not duplicate labels. So what we do is we add a phrase at the beginning. I've been starting mine with lowercase letters. I've noticed that Salesforce has on and off had a bug where uppercase labels will not pull into flows. So I've just been using lowercase to play it safe. But I start with the product or with the object. Then I wanted to make sure it was clear that these are all products. And then I included the name. We also like to use our categories on our team as a good way to also curate a set of data. we have our description, and then our channel IDs. For this particular use case, I also set up a custom metadata type called product feedback. And I did this for two particular reasons. The first reason I did it was on creation of a product feedback record, I want, based on the product, to assign a particular queue as the owner. So I started out by creating this mapping, but then I extended that use case because I also want to be able to, based on the product selected on the feedback record, to identify which channel this should be posting to. So here's what the record triggered flow looks like, and we're going to talk a little bit through some of this as we go. So the first thing to note is for record triggered flows, you have to use the post to Slack action using a scheduled path flow. You can't do run immediately. I'm not entirely sure what the reasoning is behind that, but you will get an error when you save and try to activate. The shortest wait you can have is by setting your trigger to 0 hours after create. I found that on average, it's about a 2 to 3 minute delay at most. So if we look at our flow, we're first getting our custom metadata type records. We are identifying whether or not we found a channel. So I created some error handling in here in the event that someone spins up a new channel that's not mapped to Salesforce, or someone spins up a new product and forgets to map the product out there. So in the one branch, we have identified our channel and we are sending our post to Slack, and then we are updating the records. And the update of our initial feedback record is to add that timestamp, which would allow for threading in the future. On the right side, we're posting a different message that alerts the recipients in a particular channel that there was no product-specific channel available, and we're also sending a second alert to the Salesforce team's channel so that they're alerted that we have an unmapped product and we may want to coordinate with product to get that taken care of. The next thing I want to talk about is your flow failures. They will happen. They can be frustrating. I'm sure everyone who's built a flow knows that. But with a record trigger flow, what is going to happen is, with a scheduled path, is your flow is going to appear in two places. It'll be in time-based workflow in that list of monitored activities that are scheduled to go out, and it will also be in paused and failed flow interviews. The nice thing about paused and failed flow interviews is you can click through it and you can step through what went wrong and identify how to fix that. For me, the biggest errors I tend to get are either JSON or something called blocks, which we'll talk about in a bit. I highly recommend that if you do have a flow failure and it is a record triggered flow, so it's on a scheduled path, that the first thing you do is you go into time-based workflows and you delete out that scheduled interview, because what will happen is if your post fails, it'll re-queue and it will keep posting and also keep sending failure emails, which I'm guessing if you are sending it to a distribution list like our team, people will get tired of seeing a frequent list of error messages. So now let's step through the screen flow. And as a refresher, the screen flow was when we went back to the existing record and we decided to update it with some product owner notes. They run immediately, so you don't have to set an offset, and you can enhance a screen flow with a lot of nice little extras that you can find in unofficial Salesforce. So you can add toasts, you can add validation, and we'll talk a little bit about that. My teammate is actually using a error toast as the validation to warn the user when there's an issue with a post that would otherwise fail. And you could add some closing messages, thanking them for entering the feedback or recapping what they've entered. So let's step through that. We have our first screen and we have a decision here. Are we posting to Slack or not? If we're not posting, we're just updating the record. If we are posting to Slack, we are again making the decision, are we mapping it to a product? So if we can't find a map, we will again post that there is no channel mapped. We have a special message with an alert on it. If we've mapped it, but maybe we can't find the thread, Typically, this would happen if we had an initial unmapped post and now we have a subsequent post that didn't have the thread ID. We will post it brand new. And if we have a mapped post, we will post there and we will thread it as a reply to our original post to the Slack channel. Once we've done all that, we are going to update the feedback record as well with all of those changes we just made. So let's start to break down the post to Slack, which in my opinion is the most complicated part of building out your integration with Salesforce and Slack. So this is what the primary screen looks like on the left, and we'll start there. So you're forced to set your channel ID, but you should also assume that your token and either blocks or text are required. So your channel ID is where you're going to send it. Your token is your authentication. If you don't authenticate, you're not going to be able to actually push the post out. Blocks and text we will talk about in the next slide. And those are two different ways of posting text to Slack. Optionally, if we want to have the option of threading our post, we're going to want to assign an output variable. So here I've created a text variable for thread, and that allows me to store that thread, and then I'm writing it back to the record that started my flow. Then I could use that in future posts to then thread those messages together. So let's talk blocks versus text. Slack posts must adhere to JSON format, and again, reserve those escaped characters that we've talked about. The left caret, the right caret, the and sign, plus any of the JSON characters. And I have links in an earlier slide that'll give you a list of what those characters are. The Slack action also, it's important to note, works with plain text fields. It does not fully work with rich text fields. It works with number fields and other types of fields, but text is where you have to pay attention to what fields you're using and how you're composing your posts. So it will post your rich text, but it will display all the HTML markup. So if you've used bullets or if you used paragraph tags, it'll show those particular tags directly within the post. It's readable, but it's kind of ugly. So I would, if possible, try to avoid using rich text fields in your posts to Slack. If someone has a great way of stripping out the markup, but maintaining some of the formatting like carriage returns, I would love to know. Maybe you can post that in the community. But as I noted, there's two main methods for posting. There's blocks or there's text. I've hyperlinked blocks because there's an entire block kit that Slack provides. I had a lot of issues leveraging the block format. I was able to write up my posts and pass the block kit's error handling to say that it looked like a good post. But then when I posted it, I was getting invalid format. The format looks a lot like code. So there's indenting, there's curly braces, and it gives you a lot more latitude on what you can customize, but it can be finicky, at least with this integration, so I found. The text option leverages a text template, plain text, and a Slack markdown format. So you want to make sure when you set up your text template variable, you're choosing plain text so that you're not bringing in any of those HTML tags as well that we talked about when using rich text fields. And we're going to talk a little bit more about this in the next slide. I found after some trial and error, the easiest way to do it, which is a little tedious, is to wrap your text fields in formulas and then insert them into the plain text variable. Again, we're going to look at this on the next slide, but the main reason we're doing that is to ensure that we're not escaping, we're only escaping the text and we're not escaping any of the markdown that we're adding to really format that post. So let's look at what this all looks like. So this top line is an ugly little formula I put together that I wrap all of the text fields I use in my posts. So I'm using 3 substitutes to handle my left caret, my right caret, and my and sign, because it's not using all of the HTML reserved characters. It's only using those 3. Then I'm wrapping the entire phrase in JSON code, which is going to handle all of the JSON characters for me. Unfortunately, JSON encode also handles the asterisk character. So the one thing our team has noted is that we're unable to pull out the asterisk using substitute, and it's handled with JSON code. So we've guided our users not to use asterisks. We've done that either through validating within the flow or through validation rules if it's for a field that's going to get posted to Slack. So here's what a formatted post looks like, and I'm going to just talk through this with you knowing that the bottom is what this ends up looking like. So if we want to bold text, we use the asterisk on either side of the text. So we have it here before the left caret, and we have it here before the right caret. And in between, we have a URL. So the first thing to note is I have a custom label that I call domain. I store the HTTPS, I store my custom domain, basically everything up to .com/. Then I've hand keyed in the object that we're pulling the data from with a /. Again, I'm inserting a token for the record ID, and then /view. When we add the vertical pipe separates the actual URL from the text we want to display. Anytime we use colons with words in between them or letters in between them, that's denoting a reaction. So this : new : represents this new image right here. Then we've added the name. So I'm using a formula field again to use all this functionality up here and spit out Packing Issues Hot Sauce, which was the name of the record. /n, and I have a link to the markdown in an earlier slide, is how we specify a new line break. If you want to put a full space between them, you can do 2 in a row, like we've done between the account name and feedback here. Again, leveraging our bolding, leveraging our formulas where necessary, we've translated this string into this post. So let's talk best practices, troubleshooting, and considerations. Some of this is going to be a review of what we've already talked about, but I highly recommend testing your flow in a test channel before moving to live channels. When I first built this out, I demoed it with a dummy Slack workspace, but then I moved into a test channel so we could get our stakeholders in, testing it out, making adjustments, instead of hitting a live channel with lots of dummy posts. As a reminder, we can't handle asterisks. It's going to cause your post to fail, but you can put some validation in place to prevent them. As a reminder, when your posts do fail, they're going to try and resend. So you're going to need to look in those 2 places we talked about earlier, our paused and failed flow interviews and our time-based workflow. And if you want to prevent resending, you're going to need to delete that interview. One thing I also learned in the process of building out this demo is if you want to delete an old flow version, you must delete all the failed interviews tied to that version. I was getting a dependency issue when I was trying to remove those. So the next thing, leverage custom labels or custom metadata types. Please try and avoid hard coding IDs into your flows. You can make them more scalable and more readable if you're leveraging one or both of these features. And I would also emphasize using a naming convention that would make sense and makes it easy for someone to locate. It's going to be harder if you're not following a standard naming convention to make sure you found all the labels that are out there, and likely will lead to redundancy. Storing the timestamp. We talked about this before. If we store the timestamp on the record, and normally I would make that a hidden field, it'll allow you to thread posts in the future. I would say store it now. You never know when you're going to want to add threading, even if it's not an immediate use case. And then again, as a reminder, when we're talking about text fields, you can use rich text fields, but be warned that the HTML tags are going to appear in your post. So now that we've broken it down, I want to run through the demo again real quick, just to give everyone a feel for what we're doing. So again, we are creating our record. We've got confirmation it's been created. We're migrating over to our Slack workspace. We found our message. We're updating our record. Sending it to Slack. And we found our reply. So that's the end of my presentation. Do Rakesh and Michelle, do we have some questions?
Oh, we sure do. So, okay, Reese has several, so I just want to make sure I get all of this in. So first up, do you think it would be possible to create Slack posts for flow errors? I'm thinking of non-admin users who might like to sort of subscribe to errors for flows relevant to a process or product they own versus getting emails for all of the flows. He followed up about, he or she, I guess, sorry. I think I just answered my own question. I was thinking literally the failed flow record trigger Slack post, but if I had a subflow for posting anywhere a flow could error, that would work. Thoughts?
So I think you could. The one thing I would be concerned about is whether anything in that sort of default error message would violate like the syntax rules, like the asterisk in particular. But I think you could. At the very least, you could post a link to that failed interview record and allow someone to open that up. I really like that idea.
Awesome. Okay. And then follow-up question again, Reese once more. Mary mentioned getting errors when trying to delete a flow, and she had to delete failed flows first. Is that true with all flows or just when she was doing the Slack work?
I suspect it's all flows. I suspect, I know that's a newer feature that I believe came out with Summer. It was the first time I had encountered it. So if I had to guess, it probably is the case. I would have to look more into it. I don't know if anyone else on the call knows.
I'm pretty sure it's all, but I'm not going to bet any money on it. Let's put it that way.
Yeah, and my teammate brought up an interesting question when we were talking about this today. He was wondering how long they keep the fail flows. I have to imagine at some point they'll archive them because it has the potential to get very large. So it's possible at some point they'll only be available for a finite period of time. And then I was doing it in the same day, so they were brand new records. It's possible that those may be archived or deleted after a certain point in time, but I don't know that for a certainty. So I would highly recommend you look up the answer. And if you find it, I would love if you shared it in the community so we can all benefit.
Awesome. Doing a quick refresh on the Trailblazer community too to see if there's anything posted out there. Looks like not at this particular point in time. So, all right, I'll look through the questions one more time if anybody has any more here. Reese, did we get everything that you wanted to ask answered for you? I'll follow up with that too, just in case I missed anything. Perfect. Reese says yes, all questions answered. All right, we got a new question in from Jeff. We ran into authorization issues when trying to post to Slack when creating a QUIP document using the flow/process builder functionality. The post to Slack would go from each user. We wanted to know if there was a way to post on behalf of someone, like as a pre-authorized user.
I believe you can post. I'm going to pause my sharing for a second. See if I can switch to my browser because I opened up a few things in advance. Sorry, let me see if I can pull up the Slack scope. Okay, so here are the permission scopes, and it'll tell you if they're a user or bot. I believe there is the ability to impersonate. I don't remember the exact. Oh, here, manage a, let's see, no, that's channels right. I would recommend double checking the Slack scopes, but I am 80% sure you could post as someone else, and that might solve your issue. Because I would imagine if you are hitting a authentication issue, that it is related to your bot scopes specifically. Oh yeah, here's chat right user, send me messages on a user's behalf. I believe that one would probably get it there.
Okay. Reese's back with more questions. I absolutely love this. Thanks, Reese. All right, thought of one more question. Was the post to Slack action part of the Appexchange / unofficial app you installed, or did you have to make that?
So good question. So it is part of the unofficial. Let me show you what comes with the unofficial. You actually get a couple things. You get 2 flows. One is a sample post to Slack, which is okay. And I say it's only okay because it just has some static text in the text field. It doesn't have what I think is more the game changer and guidance on actually getting your post in the right format, because that was where I had the most trouble, was my posts weren't meeting the right format. And then I kind of went down a rabbit hole trying to figure out how to get everything into JSON format and finding all my reserved characters. So you have the post to Slack Apex class, which is what will come up in your flow when you're looking for it. So you don't have to create it at all. Did that get your question answered, Rishi?
Yes.
Okay.
And thank you.
Yes, sure. And you get 2 flows. You get this post to Slack, and then you get the Slack administrator flow. And the Slack administrator flow, I think I opened it. It looks like this, where you can create channels, you can show the channels, you can manage, and it's got a lot behind it. I'm not going to drag this all the way around, but it's a pretty detailed flow, and also will let you feed in your authentication token at the top.
Awesome. All right, doing one last refresh on everything, check in for more questions.
Sure. And I should note that I had talked to Alex Edelstein, who actually built this. Thank you, Alex. And one of the things I do owe him is adding to the write-up on the unofficial site. So if you do plan on using the Slack package to do things like manage channels, there is a YouTube video in that listing, but there isn't really a lot baked in for posting to Slack. And so that's the part I'm going to be adding. This will kickstart me writing that up.
Perfect. Okay.